to the PT on Ice Daily Show. My name is Christina Previtt. I am one of two lead faculty for modern management of the older adult. We are a constellation of 3 courses. We have our 8-week Essential Foundations online course, our 8-week Advanced Concepts course, and we also have our live course. So if you guys are interested in any of those courses, you can check us out on ptice.com. We have our next cohort of Essential Foundations that is starting next Wednesday, so the 28th of October. We are super excited. Hi, Jeff. We are going to, I think we're approaching capacity, which is really great. We're gonna have a nice big cohort and wrapping up 2020 with some topics on geriatrics. If you guys are not yet subscribed, and I'm gonna tie this in, I hope you guys are subscribed to our Hump Day Hustling email. So that is an email that comes out every Wednesday. It should be in your inbox right now. And all of the faculty pool together to create a resource for PTs that is keeping you up to date with some of the trends that are going on in the social media space, but also in the research sphere, so that you guys can stay on top of your game, because it's really important to make sure that we're trying to stay on top of some of the literature and trends in rehab that are going on right now, which is super fun. The reason why I bring that up is because this week there was a topic or a paper that was published that showed that individuals, if you compared fitness in quartiles, so the lowest 25%, 25 to 50, 50 to 75, and 75 plus, that there was a 3.88 times difference in terms of severity of symptoms, respiratory symptoms from COVID, for individuals who were in the lowest fitness quartile and those who were in the highest fitness quartile. And this is really important because it's showing that what we are seeing, just like what we're seeing in a lot of our geriatric syndromes, those clinical geriatric syndromes, which are constellations of signs and symptoms that confer vulnerability. This is another, physical activity and fitness reserve is another one of these signs that infer reserve for our clients and our younger adult, middle age, older adult kids. And it's showing just such impactful healthcare outcomes across the lifespan. And this is another example. And so I started thinking about this in regards to frailty. So you guys have, if you've been following the show for any amount of time, you know that frailty is something that I am very passionate about talking about because of what we know around frailty. Frailty is a vulnerability to external stressors, a purposefully vague definition because there's some thoughts in the literature that you can be physically vulnerable but not emotionally vulnerable, that you can be mentally vulnerable but not socially vulnerable based on the context that you're around. So if you are somebody who is been working their entire life, still lives on the farm, still does everything really well, you're 70 years old, but you live like 30 miles out of the city and there isn't really a neighbor close by, you may be socially frail just because if something were to happen, if an accident were to happen on the farm, it's not even something that was a negative health outcome from a chronic disease, you may not have someone nearby that could lead to worsening of a health outcome versus if you were living with 3 or 4 other people that could have seen something happen and react very quickly to it. And so what we're seeing in the COVID literature is that the more healthy lifestyle factors that we adhere to, the longer we adhere to those, the better we are going to do in the face of the pandemic. What we're seeing in the world of geriatrics is that the same is true, that the longer we adhere to healthy lifestyle factors, like with the masters athlete, the longer you're going to keep reserves in regards to aerobic capacity, that the stronger reserve that you have in middle age, the longer it's going to take for that reserve to be lost and hit a critical threshold. But what we need to start learning is what are those clinically meaningful changes? I was on the podcast probably about 1.5 years ago talking about how I hate slapping a label on a person and then doing absolutely nothing about it, which is what frailty used to be. We used to see a person come in and in our mind, consciously or subconsciously, we would say, well, this person is frail. And what that means is we have already made a snap judgment that they probably have less of a positive prognosis than somebody who isn't. We are probably maybe coming into those unconscious beliefs that we're going to underdose their exercise because frail equals fragile, which I would also argue is not true, but is the general consensus that is seen throughout healthcare. And we may be having this internal dialogue happen without even being really aware that it's going on. And so in my mind, if we're creating a system that identifies individuals across the frailty spectrum, which I think is extremely important because it does stratify risk and it does give us some insight into prognostic factors, then we have to know what we need to do or what amount of change in some of these frailty outcome measures are going to be appropriate to confer a large clinically meaningful difference. And one of the things that our students who are taking the Modern Management of the Older Adult course say is, well, are you, like, when I have to do my programs of care, I have to take SPPB because we know that a 1-point difference is a large clinically meaningful difference. I have to take a 6-minute walk test because we know that differences between 60 and 70 meters on pre-post test is a clinically meaningful change. But we didn't have that data in frailty until now. So we had a study that came out in the last couple of months, I think it got released in July, that started looking at evaluating clinically meaningful changes in frailty. So this is the area of my PhD dissertation, and this is something that I really geek out about. So I'm probably gonna get way more excited than you all will, but it's gonna be, if we can think about the fact that we now have data to see what is a clinically meaningful change for somebody with frailty, hey there, it's important. And I think that we can start advocating for, one, our role in the physical phenotype of frailty, and two, we can start saying, you know, we have made a meaningful change in this person's life based on these frailty outcomes, and the world of frailty and geriatrics is huge. And there's a large overlap between degree of frailty, the amount of mobility disability, and negative consequences of comorbidity. So those are all really important constructs. So the way that we evaluate frailty generally, we have Fried's physical phenotype of frailty, and there's 5 characteristics: unexpected weight loss, fatigue and lethargy, slow gait speed, physical inactivity or high amounts of sedentary behavior, and low muscular strength. So those 5 physical phenotypes, every time I wrap these off on a podcast, I'm always afraid that I'm gonna miss one, but thankfully I did not this time. Those 5 physical phenotypes are really important. And what we know is that the more of these phenotypes they have, the more frail a person becomes. And that's based on Linda Fried's research that was beginning in 2001. And so that's about 20 years old now. So what she showed was with 1 to 2 of these characteristics, a person is pre-frail. With 3 or more of these characteristics, they're considered frail, and that these actually exist across a spectrum, despite the fact that we're trying to put individuals into categorical variables. And the estimate is about 50% of individuals in community dwelling situations are considered pre-frail, and about 10 to 15% are considered frail with 3+ of those characteristics. As we transition into more assisted living facilities, seniors' homes, et cetera, that starts to shift, where more like 30 to 35% are considered pre-frail, and more like 25 to 30% are considered frail. And anyways, I could rap about this all day. So we have Linda Fried's phenotype. We have the frailty index, which is the accumulation of deficits hypothesis, which is based off a medical chart. So what it essentially does is tries to see how many negative health issues you have over the total amount of questions that you're asking. So that could be, have you been diagnosed with high blood pressure? Yes. Do you have difficulty walking upstairs? Yes. Do you have issues with cognition? No. Do you have issues with diabetes? No. And then you sum up this over the total number of questions that you ask. Traditionally, there has not been cutoff scores made for the frailty index because a large amount of these different conditions are oftentimes not reversible but manageable. But again, this study looked at trying to find important changes in these individuals. And so it took other self-report measures. The 2 that I think are important are the frailty index and the physical phenotype, because they're the most commonly known. And they gave a distribution-based and an anchor-based method. We're not going to go into the statistics of that, but the important part is that they showed that a large clinically meaningful change In both the distribution-based and anchor-based method of determining and evaluating meaningful change in individuals in large cohort studies is 0.6 to 0.7. So what that means is that if we can change one of those characteristics, which I would already say is extremely important, because if we're going from 3 to 2, that changes a person's characterization from pre-frail or frail to pre-frail. But what we are seeing is that that is also inferring a huge change in terms of a person's physical function. And I don't think that there's a single PT that would say that if all of a sudden we remove some of that low muscular strength and get them to have more resiliency, that wouldn't be just game changing for them. And that might be a change in 1 point on the SPPB. So it could be something that you are already doing. Generally, a score less than 8 is considered an individual who has frailty. Thank you. Who has frailty. And so if you can change 1 point and get them from 8 to 9, or even get them from 5 to 6, depending on where some of their issues lie, that can make and infer huge differences. The other one is the frailty index. And so I thought this was interesting because you're looking at a composite score, and generally you have to have at least 30 items for number one. But those 30 items don't have to be the same across different settings. And that's why people like to use it in epidemiological studies, where you're looking at really large cohorts of people, because the information that they gather isn't going to be exactly the same in the British longitudinal study, the Canadian longitudinal study on aging, the Nottingham study in the US. So they are going to be slightly different, but the information can be the same and extremely valuable. And so what they showed was at a difference of 0.076, so roughly about 0.08. So that's changing 1 or 2 things, which could be, are you having difficulty dressing? Yes, no, or sometimes. Then you can really change the amount of frailty that a person is experiencing. And that to me is extremely optimistic. We as a faculty in ICE are fitness forward and psychologically informed. And could you imagine trying to, or being able to tell somebody that you will largely be able to change their life? And that's why I love being in geriatrics, is that the capacity for a person to grow, if that is something that they wish to do, and be able to increase their physical activity level and resiliency is so high. Even if they've gone through multiple bouts of deconditioning, is so tangible. And now with this literature that is showing that we actually have these cut points that we can use for multiple different indices of frailty, is extremely important for us to push our profession forward and enable us to advocate for the fact that PTs should 100% be helping with the burden of frailty on our healthcare system. We have statistics that are showing that billions of dollars are spent in adverse health outcomes secondary to frailty consequences, and the physical phenotype is 4 out of 5 things we have in our wheelhouse to be able to improve. And so now we can say, not only can I help with low muscular strength, fatigue, unless it's a chronic condition related fatigue, I can help with slow gait speed, I can help with that low physical activity, I can help 4 out of the 5 of those things, and I know what a clinically meaningful change is, are 2 really strong arguments that we can make to try and get us in front of our clients for longer, to advocate for the benefit of PT for insurance reimbursement, and is one step forward in terms of not making frailty a negatively stigmatizing label, but actually something that we can do in order to put an individual into a care pathway that is going to help them get better, if that is what they want to be doing. And so I was really excited about this study. You probably are thinking, Christina, this is just a statistical study, but if we start extrapolating what studies like this mean for us as a profession, it is very exciting to see that we may have more tools for us to be advocating to help our older adult clients. All right, that is it for today. I hope you guys found that helpful. If you're looking for this study, I can post it underneath, post the citation. It was published March of 2020, so not too long ago. If you guys have any other questions, comments about how we're conceptualizing frailty, or how we are looking to try and change frailty, hit me up. But I just want to keep having this conversation because I think it's super important. All right, have a great day, everyone, and we will talk soon.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the PT on Ice Daily Show. If you enjoyed this content, head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. And be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram at the Institute of Clinical Excellence. If you're interested in getting plugged into more ICE content on a weekly basis while earning CEUs from home, check out our virtual ICE online mentorship program at ptonice.com. While you're there, sign up for our Hump Day Hustling newsletter for a free email every Wednesday morning with our top 5 research articles and social media posts that we think are worth reading. Head over to ptonice.com and scroll to the bottom of the page to sign up.